Hey guys, Sonic here from TGG and welcome back. So, this is a tutorial on how to mod weapons. Now, quick disclaimer, there's really no exact right way to build weapons. There's just a few different playstyles, so let me explain. So the first playstyle is the one who just mods for fun. The people that want to see damage but also want their weapons to be fun, let's say your gun deals a ton of damage but it needs fire rate. So you put fire rate on it instead of more damage. That's what a normal person does. Like, this gun doesn't fire fast enough, so here's a fire rate mod. That's basically how it works. Now, when it comes to optimizers build for as much damage as possible, also high. So, how you really mod your guns like this, let's take the Karak, for example. This is a fairly beginner weapon. So, this is the base Karak. It's got one polarity here. I'll show you what those are later. And it's got 8 slots, and it's got mod capacity 60 out of 60. On every single weapon is damage. There's a mod called Serration, which at max rank gives 165% damage. But this one does 135 because mine's not maxed. But you see, that just upped the damage by a whole lot. Next, there's something called multi-shot. What multi-shot does is it doubles. Basically, I have a 90% chance to fire 2 bullets. Now, the second bullet does not count as ammo. Let's say so if I for the price of 1. Now, there's another multi-shot mod called Vigilante Armaments. We'll talk about that later. Now, you just saw the polarity. When I put this mod on it, it cuts the price in half. In order to add those, there's these items called Forma, which you just ask around to see where you get them. You add a polarity. Now, next, you don't really know where to go next. Let's talk about elemental damage. Elemental damage adds basically what it says, like either 90% heat damage, 90% toxin, electricity, or cold. Now, basically, what the different elements do, they don't. So you see the status? I'll talk about that in a minute. Basically, just add a few of these mods here. These two, that'll up my damage to 362, and I have 100 corrosive. Now, some people might think that it just increases the chance I have to get the corrosive effect. Well, let me just put one element. So basically, I just have toxin right now. Yes, you can. You can mod anything. Pretty much. So basically, I now have 60% toxin on this. What that does, it gives me 60 damage that is toxin damage, which does specific damage to certain enemies. Now let me talk about elemental combos. Let's say I add electricity to that. That'll turn that into corrosive damage. That combines them together. What corrosive does is it does more damage to enemies that have armor, i.e. Grenier. Now, this is pretty much the basic mod setup, and everything after this is fairly basic. So basically, if it had a high crit and high crit chance and high crit damage, point strike and vital sense. I will show melee in a bit. So with vital sense, that adds crit damage. It's not worth it on this gun, so we're not going to do this. So this is the basic build that I suggest. Now, if you want to run more stuff, not that one. If you want to run more stuff, now this weapon has a very high status. There's these mods you can come across like this: 60% element, 60% status. Now, the high voltage is really rare, but yeah. So that's 33%. That means every 3 bullets, I'm gonna hit a corrosive effect. Every corrosive effect strips the enemy armor by 8%, stacking up to 80%. So now let's talk about the accuracy before I talk about status. This is heavy caliber. It's a mod that lowers your accuracy and increases your damage. What accuracy does is it makes your bullets hit in a specific area. Let me just fire at this pillar right here. You'll see that most of my bullets kind of hit within that small little square. You see that? Let me just get a better location. Let me just fire it here. So I fire some bullets here. You'll see that a lot of my bullets are within that little circle. But it gets kind of lower the It gets farther the more you head out. Now, let me just exit that. Now, if I add heavy caliber to this, it's going to make that accuracy even worse. There's only a few weapons that can really use heavy caliber without losing them. Laser weapons are the best to do that. Now, let's see if I go down here, and I fire bullets. You see it's starting to go outside of the circle and up to the right. Like, it's just a little bit less accurate. The Karak is actually one of those guns where you could use it, but I don't really suggest it, because the normal Karak feels really good. So, status, I already talked about status. Might see this thing called ribbon disposition. We're going to talk about that probably in a different video. That's the basic build. You can put as many elements on you as you want. Like, there's a mod called Vigilante Armaments. It adds more multi-shot. Brings up to 2.5, which means you're always going to be firing 2 bullets for free, pretty much. 1 bullet, and it'll turn into 2 bullets, and you have a 50% chance for that to turn into 3 bullets. Now, you might say, dang, this gun has a really low magazine capacity. Well, that can be buffed with certain mods. This is the more beginner tier. Now, magazine warp, that'll increase the magazine capacity by 30%. Not really the best, but it works. Basically, you just look at all the different mods and see what kind of statistics you want, and that's how it works. Now, I will say, there are 1,000 different weapons in Warframe. The Karak is one of those guns that has 3 different versions. This is the second version right here. See, if I show you just a basic build, let me just delete this from existence and go back in. So this build right here has got, now instead of 9, let me compare this to the Karak. This has 13% crit chance instead of 9, 2.0 crit multi instead of 1.5. Now this is actually worth the crit. It has a double magazine, it has double status, well, almost double status, that's another extra 10%, and it does more damage in every way. This is just better flat out. Now, let me just, so basically, why I have this 5 number up here, that's Forma. I put 5 Forma on this thing. Every time you put a Forma on it, it resets it from rank 30 back to rank 0. So I added a bunch of polarities to this. You'll see why soon. So, first, let's just start out with damage. Damage and multi-shot, as you should always do. Now, that brings you up quite a bit in damage. Now, what you're going to want to run is crit. Now, crit, point strike, and vital sense. Now, what those do, that increases your chance to hit a crit. Basically, every 10 bullets, you're going to hit 3 of those is going to be a crit. And it's just barely worth it. So, critical multiplier means every time you hit a crit, it's going to do 4.4 times the damage, or whatever multiplier of the damage that you currently have. So, now let's put on some elementals. So, let's say, just checking. Okay, so this weapon has a 25% status, which means you only need 1. I'm going to use low-level mods. Malignant Force brings up to 40%. That's actually pretty good for a weapon like this. And then you're just going to want to run one of the 90s, because that increases the damage. Because you don't want to be hitting impact procs, because those don't really do that much. Next, you're going to want to run Vigilante Armaments, and this last slot is an option slot. If you don't like the magazine, increase it. If you don't like the fire rate, increase it. If you don't like the recoil, increase it, or decrease it. And if you want to run heavy caliber, you go right ahead. Because this gun can actually, it's the same accuracy as a normal Karak. Now with this build right here, I'm going to take this against some of the toughest enemies in the game. And you're going to see it doesn't really do that much. So let me hit the 2 buttons. So basically, it's not going to do that much. Again, these enemies being paused is not going to increase my damage. But you can see this. It's actually doing fairly decent. I can't kill one of these things in a single magazine. That's where ribbons come in. We'll talk about those later. So, with this, it's it takes me a long time to kill them. And you might be wondering, hey, how are you hitting those orange numbers? So basically, crit chance is 30%. And that means I've got 30% chance to hit a yellow number. But orange numbers are 100% and above. So if I'm 102%, I've got a 98% chance to hit a yellow and a 2% chance to hit an orange. You're like, how am I hitting an orange then? I only got 30%. There's these mods called Vigilante mods. They add the bonus. It's like they have got a bonus. This is a Sentinel weapon. Basically, has a 20 with 4 of these mods. It's got a 20% chance to enhance critical hits from primary weapons. What that means is I've got a 20% chance for my yellow crit to turn into an orange crit, which basically just it basically doubles my damage. So, yeah. Basically, that's the basic build. Now let's talk about, let me just clear that. Now let's talk about the increased, the full version. This is the highest version of the Karak you can get. This is the end game version, basically. Normal Karak is like beginner, medium, like Karak Wraith is like intermediate, and this is more end game. You get this from something called a Kuva Lich. Now, me just go on a build with nothing on it. I'm just going to take this off. Might be wondering what this slot is. That's an Exilus slot. Certain mods can go in there, like Stabilizer for minus recoil. You can also have more ammo in that. Silence your weapon so you can take it in stealth missions. Make it so you pick up more ammo. That kind of stuff. Basically just a bunch of useless stuff. So this is the Kuva Karak. Now, I got a pretty good roll. I got like a 40-50% toxin. Basically, you spawn the thing with a Warframe, and its element is the same as the Warframe, pretty much. So as you see, this one has an extra 10% crit chance, an extra 0.1 crit multiplier. It's got an extra 10 rounds in the magazine. It's got this thing called Punch Through. Punch Through makes it so your bullets go through a target. And I've got 0.2 meters, which means that if I hit an enemy, the enemy right behind it that's 0.2 meters away will also get hit with it. This can hit through shield lancers. Now, 31% status, that is beautiful. And you see the ribbon distribution is slowly going down. That's because this is a 3 out of 5 is normal. Now, you won't be seeing this unless you have a ribbon mod, which look somewhat like... Nope, let me just... They're purple mods, they look like that. I have got 2 of them for this weapon. One of them is a fun, just for basic play, and one of them is an end game. So let's go with modding this as you normally would. So, damage. Multi-shot. And it can also run crit, which is pretty cool. Notice I'm at this thing has 36. Every time you format it, it gets an extra 2 ranks until it goes to 40. You guys aren't really going to need to worry about this for a while. I'm just showing you the best this thing can get. And Vital Sense for crit damage. Then I'm going to run 2 elementals. So I'm going to be running... do I normally run that? I'm pretty sure I do. So normally, you would run Malignant Force and High Voltage. Now, High Voltage is a rare mod, so you're not going to be able to get this early game. But it's still really good. So, then I'm going to run one of 2 mods. I'm either going to run Vigilante Armaments, which increases my damage pretty substantially. Like, I'm at 425. If I take it off, I am now at 323. That increases my damage by over 100. There's also a mod called Hunter Munitions. Now, this is only good on weapons that have good crit chance. But basically, every time you hit a crit, you have a 30% chance to put a slash proc. What slash procs do is they damage the enemy's health directly and it ignores armor. This is really good. It's really good when paired with the element called... which means you're basically multiplying the damage of this. Anyways, I'm going to be using Vigilante Armaments. Now let's talk about Ribbons. Ribbons are mods that you get after you complete the War Within. No spoilers on that one, complete it yourself. You get, basically, you do a challenge, and you get one of these, and you get a resource called Kuva, which you can re-roll them, and they are random stats. Now, this is a random stat ribbon. It's got 50% magazine capacity and 96% multi-shot. That's actually really good. This is my normal ribbon that I use on day-to-day use on the Karak. Now let's go on to my Karak Akriata. Plus 162% crit damage. As you can see, this is only 120. That's better than that. Plus 200% damage. That's better than that. And it's also got minus magazine capacity. If I toss this on my weapon, like that, it'll be at 8 times crit damage. That is ridiculous. And I'm going to show you with and without this. So, this is the final product. Now, what I would also do is instead of... I'm sorry about that. I wasn't really thinking. So, on this weapon, it's too accurate. For me, at least. So, if I were to fire it like this... Let me just find a wall. Look at how tight that spacing is. Like, barely any at all. Look at that tight spacing. Let me just... This weapon is too accurate. Which means it doesn't really feel like the normal Karak, and I actually have trouble hitting things with this. So what I run is, this is a perfect weapon to run heavy caliber on, because it'll do much more than that other one. Like you see, it's already increased my damage from 425 to 509. So, run heavy caliber. Now, I'm going to show you this build against the level 100 enemies. These are the toughest enemies that you can pretty much find in the game when playing it normally. And look at that damage increase. So this is, like, I actually killed it in the magazine this time. I'm actually hitting a lot of that elemental procs. And you're seeing that, like you see the status effects above its head? I already have 10 corrosive procs, which means that the enemy has already stripped 80% of its armor. Now what you can do, you can also run corrosive and heat, which strips the enemy's armor by 60%. But yeah, so with building weapons with mods, you basically just choose the damage, and you basically just choose what you want. Like, that's pretty much it. Like, you see what the weapon stats are, and you put the mods on that you want. Now, you're gonna need someone to probably guide you through it, but, like, that's what we are for, us YouTubers. So, let me throw this on, Karak Akriata. You can see that drastically increased my damage, again, 190 damage, and almost doubled my crit damage. Now, this is the build that I normally run. Now, if I look at this... Sorry, I keep running back and forth. If I go from normal to Riven, it is literally the exact same build, except the mods are in different places. Now, why does it do more damage? Oh, I'm running... So, I'm running a higher ranked damage mod. Just don't worry about that. It just adds 20% more damage. That barely does anything. I kind of forgot about that. Now, just watch. I went from killing an enemy and a half in a magazine to killing 4 enemies in a magazine. This is a ridiculous weapon. And it's my favorite. This is my time. Now let's talk about... Pistols are basically the same thing. Damage, multi-shot. Pistols have 2 multi-shot mods. That's pretty much the same thing. Now let's talk about melee. I'm going to be using... the Galatine Prime. This is it's a pretty simple weapon. So with building this, you're going to see some mods that really don't make sense. Like, what's Blood Rush? What's Drifting Contact? Primed? What are those? Okay, let me explain. Pressure Point gives you my damage. That's needed. After that, you're going to want a melee combo. So Electricity, this is Primed to Fever Strike. It's basically just Fever Strike that's a bit more powerful. That's what it does. Now, Berserker, there's mods that you'll have. You don't even need Berserker for this. You can use a mod called Fury, which increases attack speed. This gives you 75%. Basically, this gives you 25% attack speed every time you hit a critical hit. And this mod right here is going to make sure of that. So, that's why I'm running this. It's just better overall. Drifting Contact gives me more combo duration. If you guys don't know, melee weapons have a combo counter, which means every time you hit an enemy... Let me just spawn these enemies real quick. This is not actual damage or paused. Melee weapons do more damage against paused enemies. If you look in that bottom right corner right there, just keep your eye on that, you see I'm currently at 9 times, 12 times. I'm at 12 times combo counter. That means that I'm going to have 12 times more damage on my heavy attack, which is what I just did. Now, heavy attacks, you don't really need to know how to build for heavy attacks yet, because those are really powerful, and stuff that you're not really going to worry about. So let's talk about these mods now. Organ Shatter gives crit damage. What that does is it means that it makes your critical hits do more damage. I already talked about this. Primed Reach. Now, there is a normal version of Reach, duh. Primed mods are just a better version of normal. 1.1 range, this gives 3. Now, every melee weapon has a range right there. Range. Means you can hit enemies within like 6 meters with your melee weapon. Melee weapons are much better than guns, in my opinion. But yeah, range is pretty needed on most weapons. Now this mod, this is a really rare event mod. Basically every single combo counter, you see I was at 12 times, each one gives me 54.5% crit chance. Which means that it's pretty ridiculous. Now let me unpause the AI. I'm invincible right now, so they can't kill me. And just watch what this weapon can do. Now I'm using a stance right now. Stance mods and change the way you attack. Look at this. I'm hitting orange crit, basically. Now, this is one of the most powerful weapons in the game again. There's some more powerful weapons, but that's basically the normal crit build. Because, I mean, it has decent status and decent crit, but right now I'm just talking about crit, and crit does really good. Blood Rush is a mod that you're not going to have to worry about for a while. There's a ability called, there's a event called the Stalker Acolytes, and that's where you get that. Let's talk about hybrid builds. Hybrid builds focus on crit and status. So if we look at this, Condition Overload for damage, basically every time I proc a status, it'll increase my damage by a pressure point. It's basically pressure point, but it does more. Blood Rush, you already know what that does. Berserker for attack speed, Round Breach for range. These two mods, Voltaic Strike and Virulent Scourge, for toxin and status chance. And Drifting Contact for combo duration. This one is Weeping Wounds. This is the status variant of Blood Rush. Now, it's a little bit less powerful, but this will get my status chance up to 100% with a few combo counter. So you're going to want that because you need... basically, with this build, you're not going to be one-shotting enemies, but you have a really high chance to two-shot them. Now, this is... Condition Overload is better on weapons that have decent status. Like, you see I did one hit that did 46, and then after that, everything just kind of does more damage. Now, just do that, just do Flash Procs, and I'm doing about 4,000 damage per hit. Now, if I just spawn in one of these, you'll see Condition Overload work. It's magic. That's 2. No. Give me 1. Now these are level 100 stuff that, like, you're already going to know how to build weapons by the time you reach level 100. But you see that now I got status procs. Now I'm doing 2,500. Now I'm doing 2,600. I'm doing 21, 29. Basically every single status proc he has on him increases my damage by a pressure point. Pretty good. Now let's talk about the final melee build that you're going to want to run, called Viral Slash. Now, what that is, slash procs, as I said earlier, damage the health of the enemy directly. What Viral does is, let me just read this off the tooltip. Most effective against screenier clones. Viral status increases health damage taken by 325%, which is about 3 times-ish. That means that I'm going to be multiplying my slash proc damage by 3 times by hitting these enemies with it, with having that one element. Now, Corrosive is one of the best elemental combos out there because it does more damage against pretty much everything. But Viral Slash is the one that scales into super high level because these are the highest level enemies that I can spawn in this simulation. Now, you'll see, I stopped hitting those enemies. Do you want to know that? Because once you get enough slash procs, they're just going to die. That's what this does, is it puts these slash procs in the enemies, and they just die. Like, you don't even have to do anything. Now, I have several... Now, bad community feedback is always painful, Because, like, I know everyone says viral heat, viral heat, viral heat, and it's false. Corrosive and heat is actually much better, and corrosive does a lot more damage. So, now, last build for melee. I'm a melee main, so I know more about melee than I do guns. Let's talk about heavy attack builds. So what a heavy attack build is, it's building around the idea of doing heavy attacks. Now, as you can see, this looks very much different from my other builds. That's because you use an entirely different set of mods. Now, let's talk about this. Killing Blow increases my melee damage, and it also increases the speed of my heavy attacks. This increases damage outright. This just gives me more attack speed than normal Fury. Attack speed is needed on these weapons. True Steel, that adds crit chance, and ×2 for heavy attacks. I didn't say that. Crit chance is always ×2 for heavy attacks. Then I'm running this. You don't need this. You get it from certain enemies on Jupiter, I think. And it's a little bit worse than normal Organ Shatter, like by 5%, but it doesn't really matter. And it also increases my heavy attack speed. 2 corrosive damage. And Corrupt Charge, this is a mod. You don't need this, but it basically doubles your damage. It makes it so you're always at 2 times combo multiplier, but you're never going to be any higher. So as you can see, I'm always at 2 times. I never go down from it. Now this is a katana. The reason I'm using a katana is it has a guaranteed slash proc. Let me do this. Watch this. Now this is a heavy attack build. Now it's not as fun as a light attack build, because light attack builds do more damage, like in the long run. But heavy attack builds can kill stuff pretty dang fast. You just do one heavy attack and they're just gonna die. You see him? He's just gonna bleed out. This does one-shot these enemies. Now, this is really good when mixed with a lifesteal mod. There's a mod called Life Strike, which makes you heal from heavy attack hits. But again, I didn't really have the space to put on this build. But building the stuff with mods is just, it's basic. Like, you just need to know what the weapon needs. Like, if it's got decent crit, put crit on it. Got decent status, put status on it. And the more endgame builds, like the ones that I use, they're just slightly better with the damage department. That's really all. I mean, this heavy attack build, Corrupt Charge is a really rare mod. If I didn't have it, I would not be one-shotting these guys, though. I just got it today, actually. So, if I head over to this guy, I do one heavy attack on him, he's just gonna die. Do you see that? I just one-shot him with a single heavy attack. Now, before I go, I'm gonna talk about stance mods. What stance mods do, I'm just gonna say this real quick. Stance mods basically give you different combos. That's a stand still, circles a melee attack, stand still, walk forward, holding L2 and basically holding L2 and standing still, and holding, that's basically the aim button, if you're wondering. And that's walking forward, holding the aim button, and attacking. Now, to give you a decent example, stance mods also increase your mod capacity. Now, the standing still one does the most damage, pretty much. That's a standing still. Here's the walking forward one. Now, standing still, and then walking forward. The walking forward one always moves you around pretty fast. Those are the 4 combos. You can also do slam attacks, air attacks, heavy attacks, and heavy slams. That's pretty much it. And also heavy attacks, you can aim them in a certain direction. That's basically it when it comes to guns. That's basically it when it comes to weapons. You just need to find what the weapon needs, get feedback, like having people like me around or like other Warframe veterans to teach you how to build stuff is actually really good. Now, Warframes are pretty complicated. I'll probably go over that in a different video because this is already running freaking long. But basically, everything just kind of works out. Like, you just need to learn how to build stuff, and it's super easy. Some people struggle with it, and that's why you have people like me or other Warframe veterans to help you. Or people that just know what they're doing. I mean, I've got a friend who only has 300 hours and he's decent at building stuff. He still asks me for help sometimes. So don't be afraid to ask help. That's what I'm saying. Because learning how to mod stuff properly takes a lot of time. But you'll learn it eventually. So stick with the game and learn. Anyways, I'm going to head out. If you guys enjoyed this long video, hit that like button. And if you're new, make sure to subscribe. I upload content pretty much weekly, or daily, weekly, or sometimes every 2 weeks. I don't really have a specific upload schedule because I don't really make money off of this, so it's just mainly a hobby. But you know. I'll see you guys next time. Sayonara, out.